So welcome back to this part 2 of the Redux series. The first part we kind of like went over a little bit of Redux basic and I kind of exception with the payload. I didn't do anything on the payload because sometimes it might make things a little confusing. So I kept it to the basic. Make sure you have the basic down on the first part, and on the part 2, like this video, we're going to cover the payload. So once we cover payload, this is going to be basically a complete Redux tutorial. So if you haven't watched the first part, it's totally fine. You don't have to, it's not a requirement, but it kind of like gives you a basic. If you're not familiar with it, you can go ahead and do that. If not, it's totally fine. So this is like from scratch, a full tutorial on Redux. So what are we doing on this video? In this video, we're going to be creating e-commerce features. So if you're working as a software engineer, you might have something like this on your team, on your project. If you know how e-commerce works, you can add this Redux. After watching this Redux tutorial, you can actually add this feature on your own. So it's very crucial skills to have, and I think it explains Redux really well. Like once you are able to implement this, you will have a really strong grasp of the Redux technology. So we're going to be having a store, like a e-commerce site. There's going to be some option item to choose from. Once you choose those items, you can add those to the cart. There's going to be a display for the cart, and then you can also delete item from the cart. If you don't want those on the cart, you can delete it by clicking on it. And you can also see the total price of all the items in a cart. So very awesome feature to work with. And without further ado, let's get started. Now, before I dive into code, I want to go over this diagram a little bit to give you a little bit of refresher. If you don't know what Redux is, this diagram actually like puts it really well. So you have a store, you have a reducer, you have a state. So you have an action as well. So action comes in when you do kind of a event handling stuff. Like when you click on a button, the action gets dispatched. You have a dispatch function. It dispatched to the reducer. Reducer see you want to make some changes. It make some changes to the state. And then you can grab the state to the UI. You can display it on the React side of it. So that's what Redux is. And let's jump right into the code and start it with it. So I'm going to create my npx create React app. I will call this Redux ecom. For e-commerce. So once I'm inside the directory on my project, I'm going to install two things: npm install Redux, React Redux. So we are installing the Redux package and the React Redux package. So once I have that installed on my project, I should be good to go. And right before I jump in, I want to go over a little bit. So this diagram I showed earlier might not make sense if you're new to Redux. So bear with me. Once we start coding it, it will make a lot of sense. And if you saw my part 1 of the video, you probably have an idea, so you don't have to worry about this. So first thing first, I'm going to start the project. Once I have project loaded, I'm going to change some stuff in here. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to have 3 parts. The first part is product. I'm going to capitalize it so you can like see the difference, and I'll create a line in here. And then the second part is going to be carts, and then I'm going to have a divider as well, and then I'm going to call it price or total price. So we have 3 places. Now when I talk to you about making an e-commerce cart, clicking on the item, you put it on the cart and display. It sounded very fancy, but we're not gonna do any styling. Just for the sake of the Redux tutorial, we're gonna stick to very basic styling, just text that will make our interaction happen. So if you wanna add more styling, you're welcome to go ahead and add more styling. Maybe add some Tailwind CSS, Bootstrap, whatever we have, make it look really nice. But for now, I will just keep it very simple. So we have those 3 in place. Then what I am going to do is start creating our Redux stuff. So First thing, create a folder called store. And in the Redux side, I like to have two things, reducer, yes, and I will have store.js. So in reducer, there's also another one called actions, but in this, I'm going to create action a little bit later just to show you what you can, why you want to create action and why you don't want to. On my first part, I did it earlier, but in second part, I want to change things a little bit so you looking at it in different ways. So yeah, reducer, let's start building out reducer. I'll type in initial state. And in this state, we're gonna have a couple of things. We're gonna have our products. Or we can think this store as a grocery store. So we have a item that you probably see in grocery stores. Price 10. Then I will have another one. Name is orange. I'll do price of, let's say, 15. I'll have another one, product. This one's going to be a mango. Let's bump up the price a little bit. You can also do your own product if you want. If you want some product you like to buy, computer parts, you can put that in here. It doesn't have to be apple, oranges, mangoes. So get creative. You can get creative with it, of course. So we have first state is a product. The second is a cart. So in our cart, initially we're gonna have some product, but on the cart it's gonna be empty. So initial state, product, empty cart, and we're gonna have a total of 0. So this is like the initial state, and looks great. We don't have anything on the cart. Total is 0. It's fine. We can start with that, and then we're gonna do a reducer. Let's name it cart reducer. And then state is equal to initial state. Remember, reducer takes two things, state and an action. So let's jump back into the diagram. You see we have a reducer. It takes in two things, state and an action. So the action, when action comes in, it should know what kind of action you want. Are you trying to deposit? Are you trying to withdraw? So we need that two things. So in here, I'll type in action as well. So let's see. Right, let's build out the function. And there we have it. We have a state, which is equal to initial state. So we initialize some value and an action in here. Now, I always like to use a switch statement. You can use if else, if it's totally fine. I think switch kind of makes things a little readable. So we're gonna be switching for action.type. So whenever we have an action, we have two things, type and payload. So we have a type and then payload. We need to, the reducer watch for the type and then decide what kind of action it needs to take. So for the type, we're gonna be working with case. First case is purchase. Purchase is basically if you want to add that item to the cart, you do the purchase action and it does some changes to the state. So once you have that action in there, we want to make some changes to the state. So I will return the state. You should always return the state so it keeps on updating the original state. And then you want to return whatever changes you want to make. So I want to change two things, cart. We want to keep whatever is on the state, and then we're going to add action.payload. Now, payload is something that I didn't work with on the previous example on the first part because it could make things a little complicated. So in this one, we're gonna go over a little bit more on the payload. So action have payload. So payload is basically the data that the action should have. So remember, we have deposit 10. See, the payload have a value of 10. So it's carrying that $10 value and then it's adding it to the state. So the payload kind of is a box that contains the value that you want to change to the state. So type is referring to what kind of change we are doing a purchase. So whenever we have a purchase action type, the payload is going to be added to the cart, and then we are going to change the total as well. So state.total plus, since we are purchasing it, we need to add the value in. So action.payload.price. I will go over again. Before I do that, I want to just secure a default, just the line goes away. So when it's default, I'll just return state. That's it. If it's default, just return the regular state. And if it's a purchase, again, going over this one more time, cart is going to be adding the payload data. So whatever on the payload, in this case, is going to be the item right here. So it's going to be adding to the cart. So if we add a mango, we want to have it on the cart. So it added that data into the cart. And then the payload also going to be, it's going to be like an object. So we can create an object. We can keep it like a static number, a string. In this case, since we have a couple of things to work with, name and price, we're going to bring it into an object. So in that object, we're going to have the name and the price. So the price, payload.price get added into the total. So we have a total of, maybe if we click on the mango, it will be added $30 to the total. So that's what's happening in here. The next thing we're going to do is export default cart reducer. So our reducer is complete. Here's some basic stuff happening. We're just adding some data, manipulating the cart and total. So next thing is I'm going to go onto the store, and I'm going to be bringing in the create store. So let's do cart reducer in here, and then I'm going to create the store. So const store is equal to create store, which actually is a function that comes from the Redux library. So there we have it. Now on the previous one, I used like a combined reducer. Since we only have one reducer, I don't need to use that. So like I told you before, I'm gonna do a little things differently. So we have idea on different kind of Redux. In one team, they might use combined reducer. If you work in another team, they might not use it. So that's why in this one, I'm not going to be using the combined reducer. But combined reducer basically wrap this into a couple of reducers. So you have cart reducer, you're gonna have like a product reducer, and all those are combined into all of this. And then that makes into one root reducer, and you just pass that root reducer in here. But if you don't have that, you just pass in whatever reducer you have on the create store. So we have a store, it's like create store, cart reducer, and a bit of a tip. There's a cross sign in here because it's been deprecated, create store. So right now Redux wants you to use Redux Toolkit, which I'm going to make a separate video. But for this tutorial, I want to use the create store because this way you have a general idea of how Redux works, like the core knowledge of Redux. Redux Toolkit kind of makes things a lot easier, so we don't have to write a lot of this boilerplate. So that's why there's a mark in here, because it's been deprecated. So you can see here. So we're going to be exporting the store. Also, side note, and the side note, if you have any question, comment down below. I'm happy to address anything you have. If you are confused about something, I'm happy to jump in and explain again and again. I want to make sure you really understand Redux. It's a complicated topic, but it's really important because almost all companies use it. So we have that. We are exporting the store. So what happens when you export the store? So we have basically worked with Redux. Like in here, we just create a reducer, and here we brought in the Redux from the Redux library. But so far we haven't used the Redux, React Redux. Now we need to use it because we want to create, we want to create a like a. So now we want to use it because we want to use the Redux with our React application. So we want to have a joint. Like we want to join the Redux to our React application. So that's what this library does, React Redux. What you do is you go to the most root element or parent element, and you bring in two things: provider and the store. So in here I'll do import provider from React Redux, and then I'm also going to bring in store from store/store. So from right here. Right, so we bought this store in and we bought this provider from the React Redux. Now you're going to go in here and then go to the most parent element and type in provider in here and wrap it around your whole application. And then in here, pass in store equal to store. So far, it's working, no error in here. That means we successfully connected our Redux store to our React application. So this should be good. You have a nice setup right now. Now I'm going to do is start bringing stuff in here. So from our Redux store, we have the product. So I'm just going to display it on the product side in here. Now you need two things to do that. Remember, if you are interacting with a store, let's go back to the diagram, you need a dispatch that kind of like interact with your UI event handler. And there's another thing called use selector. There's also another thing just to mention, use store. Like you can have this right here, use store. Let's see, I'll type it in. So they say like you want to use selector, but there was something called use store which brings in the whole store. You don't want to do that because you don't want the store in every element. You just want to bring whatever you need from the store only. So that's why we want to use selector for that. Like let's your React component read data from the Redux store, and it read only the data that you want. So that's really efficient way to read the data. So let's go back to the diagram, and then I'm gonna bring that in here. I'll import two things. Use dispatch, which is dispatch an action, and use selector. That's also coming from React Redux because right now we are interacting with React and Redux. So we're gonna use this library here. So dispatch, we don't need that. We're gonna be doing it a little bit later. Right now we need a use selector because we are using that to kind of bring in the data from the reducer. So right here, I'm gonna do is const product, and in here I'll do use selector, and use selector taking a state, and then it's kind of like split the state data. So in here we're reading through this right here. So we are going into the state and we're reading the products. So state.product. Now, one point on the previous part one, we use something called combined reducer. So if we have that, if you're using combined reducer in this, you need to put in the name of the reducer. Like for example, we have the name cart reducer. You need to put that before the product. Otherwise, if you're not using combined reducer, you just straight up go to the product because we only have one store right here. So that's it. We have the product in there, and then it's time to display it. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a select HTML, and then we're going to be doing right here products dot map, and in here we're going to need two things: product index, and right here we'll do return option. And then I'll do is product.name, and we're gonna have product.price. Now this is name is coming from here and the price is here. So let's go to the store. Look at that, we have it all working nicely. So we're reading through this initial state. We have all the item we have in our store, so it's working great. Let's add a key in here, index, and then for the value we're gonna be doing is price, product.price. So yep, we have it all working nicely. Index value. Let's jump into our purchase handler. So this is a little bit of a small trick, but I want to leave it as a challenge. I want you guys, if you watch my first part, you would have an idea what to do. We're gonna use dispatch in here. So when I click on one of these items, I want it to be added to the cart right here, and the cart is coming from here. So if you know what to do, pause the video. I know it's a little bit of a tough challenge, but if you can do it, this will be a really great practice. But if not, play the video, come back to this, and we're gonna tackle this right now. So let's start with this. What we are trying to do is when we click on it, something will happen. Like we're gonna be dispatching an action. So right here, when we click on the UI button, we want dispatch an action that's going to make some changes to the store reducer and add some stuff in here. And on the cart, we're going to be pulling use selector. We're going to be pulling the cart to display all the data in the cart. Let's jump right into it. So first thing right here, I'm going to do select in here and on change. So when we make changes, we want to dispatch an action. I'm going to create a separate function called purchase handler, passing the event right here because we need whatever value we are working with. So we have an idea what kind of what are we clicking on over here. So write in the function in here, const purchase handler. We have that working, and then it takes in a parameter called event. Now, what we want to do is we want to grab whatever we click on this. So we want to grab the value in here, which is the price, because we will be adding some total. Whatever the value we have on the price, we want to add it on the total. And then the text, like the name, we want to be adding to the cart. So let's restructure it. I will type in name is equal to e.target dot options. Since we are working with options in here, we're gonna create target dot selected index, which is HTML function for this event handler. So this is basically coming from event that HTML provide by itself, and we're gonna be grabbing the text. So whatever index we are working with is going to grab the text from it. I can console log and show it to you guys what it looked like. So here, click on this, it's copying in everything in here. So name, mango, 30. So that's kind of the name is coming from here, but got rid of that. This is what it looked like. Mango 30. So that's the value, the product, and we want to put that into our cart. So we know what kind of product we have on the cart. The next we want is the value. So it's a price. Why we need price? Because we will be adding it to our total. This is just a text. So whatever we have in here is just a string, and the value contains a string as well, but we're going to convert it to %. But we just need this. We just need the number, so that this is where it stores the number. So here we're gonna do is e.target.value, just getting the value from here, which is the price. And this is a string, by the way, so we want to make it into a number first int. Why we want to make it into a number? Because we want to add it to the total. So we have something that we can work with, and let's create an object. Let's name it item object, which is going to have a name and price. So we are passing these two values into our object, and let's console log what it looks like. So we have an object with the name and the price. So that could easily work with right here. So name kind of like adds it into the cart, the price kind of added into the total. Now the thing is, we have to work it with an action. In the first part, I had a separate action, but in this one, we don't. So what we can actually do, we can actually dispatch some action in here without having a separate file for the action, but later on I'm going to create an action file just to make things a little easier. So I'll bring in the dispatch, and I will use dispatch. Once we have the dispatch ready, we can do is dispatch, and we're gonna pass in type. Remember, dispatch action have two things. So without creating an action, we just going to create an object with everything inside. So the type's going to have called purchase, and then we're gonna have a payload that's gonna have item object. So no separate action file, we put the action right in here without creating a separate function. Let's see if this works, by the way. So in order to see if this works, I need to bring some stuff on the cart as well. So I will do is cart in here. Use selector. State.cart, and then right here. And in this cart place, I'm going to kind of like map through the cart, and because cart itself is an array, and I will just map it over here. So cart dot map item and index, and we will have this item in here. And in here we will have item dot name. So if this work, if this dispatch work, it will add an item to the cart, and the cart will come in here and display the item. So one last time, I think this might confuse people, so I want to explain it one more time. You're basically dispatching an action. The action takes two things, type and then payload. So type is a purchase. We are telling it, if you're clicking on the purchase handler, we want to have a type of purchase happening, and it's going to have a payload with this data, a name and a price. Now, once this dispatch action hits the store and the reducer will come in here and like, oh, you have a purchase action, so we're going to do this. What it does, it return the state, and then it says, oh, cart have some updates, so we're gonna return the whatever on the cart, which is empty right now, and then we're gonna add in the payload. Now payload is basically the item object, which is name and price. So he's gonna add that. So he's gonna add that into the cart, the whole object. We have a name and a price, so we have this right here, and then we're gonna have a total. Now total, we didn't say in the payload, but it's in the payload right now. Payload dot price. We're gonna have access to the price of the item in here. So once we have that, we can do like the action dot payload dot price. So whatever is on the state 0, we're gonna add plus, and then add action dot payload dot price. So it's accessing right this value. So this value comes in here and like, oh, we have a price. We're gonna add that in here, and it's gonna update the changes in the cart and the total. So let's see this in action. Right, refresh. I'm gonna add mango. We have a mango. I'm gonna add grapes. We have a grapes. I'm gonna add an orange. We have an orange. So I think the total is working as well, but we don't have a display. So let's bring that in. Use selector. So we have the total. Let's do that in here. And I'm going to do is paragraph total, right? 65. So let's refresh it. Mango 30, 50, orange, apple 75. So it's working great. We have our store in here, and it's updating the dispatch stuff. Now, if you still feel like there's some confusion, feel free to rewind the video and watch it again. If you still feel like you don't have this idea, like it's confusing, like because we don't have an action file, let's create an action. So we have exactly kind of like restructuring this into a separate action, and then we bring in the action to make some changes in there. So complementing the first video, I'm going to delete this and make our own action. Kind of like keep things in a nice order fashion. So action, and this action I'm going to do export const a function, and in this function let's call it add to cart. I like to capitalize an action so you can like separate your action from your regular function. And then in this, remember action have two things, type and payload, like we had over here. So type, we're gonna return a type. If add to cart, we're gonna do a type of purchase. And then for the payload, we're gonna do an item. So again, payload, we're using the payload this time on this tutorial, so we're adding some changes in here, then bringing in that item. So whatever we put it in there, we're just adding it into the payload. Because when we call this action a function, it already have the type inside. So we only need to pass in the payload. So right here. So let's bring that in here. I'll delete everything in here. And I'll bring in that function, and I'll pass in item object, which is the payload, right? So kind of destructure the whole thing, brought that action in, and I passed in the payload only. And here the item's coming in, it's coming into payload. And we have the item as item object, name and price. So restructure it, and it's working perfect. So that's one thing, but we still have one more feature that we need to add. We have the product, we're adding into a cart, we have a total, but what if we want to delete a product? Like if I click on the mango, I want it to delete it from here, from the cart, and I want to subtract that value 30 from the 80. So if we want that to happen, I'm going to need to create another action, and then I need to dispatch that when we click on this over here. So on the cart, when we interact with the cart, I want to make some changes to that. Now, this is another challenge, another hard challenge. So if you have an idea, if you want to give this a shot, pause the video, try it out. Again, the way I want to teach is by doing. You can watch the tutorial all day long, but if you don't interact with your code on your own code editor, it doesn't make that much of a progress. So I really want you to give this a try. Just spend 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. If you can't, come back to this video. Like you at least thought about the process. That's what matters. So pause the video and then come back. So I guess if you give this a try, I would say really good job. I mean, you try something new, you play around with your idea. That's, give yourself a pat on your back. That's really great. So without any further juggling on it, I will just start working on it. So let's start it from the top. So we have the cart, right? We want something to happen in here. Before I do that, I need to also create a reducer. We need to have a different type. We need to have a different action. So reducer, let's start with the reducer. That makes a lot of sense. So for case, if we have a case called remove, we're going to make some changes, right? We're going to make some changes to our state. So I'm bringing the state. And then for cart, what we need to do is, whatever, if we have so many things in the cart, we need to filter out one item from the cart. And for filtering out, we need kind of like an index, help from this index. So what I'm going to do is for cart, I'll do state.cart.filter. I'll do index. So in here, I will have this function, filter function working, and then I'll do is index if it's not equal to action.payload.index. So if this kind of like a matches, we want to filter that out, and it's gonna filter out that item. So we need to use some index, and we need to find a way to pass that index into the payload. So really heavy use on the payload. So we are getting a really nice exercise on the payload, how payload works. So we're going to be having a really nice understanding of it as well. So let's see how that works out, right? Because if you're using Redux on production, you are doing a lot of stuff with the payload, something like this as well. So that's one of the things. The other thing we want is the minus, right? We want whatever the value is on the state, we want to minus action.payload.price, right? So payload is doing two things. It's giving us an index to filter out the data from the cart, and then we return everything except this index item. And on the cart, on the total, we're subtracting the price. So payload have price and the index that we need to work it out with. So let's come over here and try to find a way to make that happen, right? So we have this item over here. Let's add a key in here just so React doesn't yell at us. And then on click, we want that action to be happening, right? We want to make some changes. So we will create a function called delete handler. And in here, we need to pass in the index, which is right here. So the React nodes, we need to be working with this index. And then we're going to pass in price. Remember, the payload also needs the price. So we need to be working with that as well. So item dot price. So pass in these two things, and then we're going to be creating that handler in here. So in here we have index and price. So let's bring that in on the parameter. And right here, we need to be doing some dispatch work, right? So for this, we're going to create an action right here like we did before. And for this, let's type in export const remove. Let's name it remove from cart. It will have kind of like two things. Like I said, we need to have an object. So index and price. In here, we already have like an object with this two things compared in here. But in here, let's put it in different way. So we have different way of writing things. Let's do remove, and then payload, index, and price. So if you don't understand this, totally fine. I can like go ahead and make it kind of like destructure it on here, so we have an idea. So let's do let's try to match this up. So I kind of like, without having item object, I kind of like did this thing inside the action. So it kind of look a little messy, but we can like tighten things up a little bit over here. So let's do let delete item is equal to index and price, right? And then in here I'll do payload item, same thing, payload item. Let's name it delete item, and in here we pass that in here, kind of like restructuring the whole thing. So we have that in here, and then we're going to be bringing this and using that dispatch in here. So we're going to do dispatch remove from cart, and we're going to pass in delete item right here. So once we have that, the delete item have an index, which is right here, and it's coming in from here. So we have that this index we want to filter out, perfect. And the price, which is into the delete item as well. The price is coming from item.price, which we are kind of like mapping over. So we have the right price as well. Once we have that, once the dispatch is taking place, the action put those into the payload, and the type is remove. And then on the reducer, when he says remove, he says, hey, your payload have something called index. So we do have that index. So the payload, this item will have an index, and then a price as well. So it's kind of subtracting the price, filtering out the index. We're going to have a newer cart, which won't have the thing that we clicked on. Again, action kind of making sense over here. Just payload, have everything in here, and we are destructuring the payload to make it work. So you have an idea, right? For the moment of truth, let's jump into our UI and let's see if this is working. Let's add a mango, let's add a grape, let's add an orange. Now we have this in our cart, but we want to remove the mango. Let's click on the mango and see if this happens. I click on the mango disappear, minus 13 happens, minus 30 happens. Let's get rid of the orange. We only have grape, $20. It's working perfect. So that's the tutorial. I mean, I just want to cover this. I think you guys had a blast learning this. Again, Redux can be a bit tricky. And this is a really good example. Like the e-commerce, you would probably come across something like this on your project, on your work, day-to-day life. Something might be happening like this in your company, and you might want to get a good grasp of the whole thing that is happening here. If you feel like this is pretty confusing, go back, watch my first part, have a good understanding, do practice matter. Like every day, if you do practice on Redux, you'll get good at it and you will master the topics. So what I suggest you to do is take some time off, a couple of hours, or tomorrow, try to recreate this whole thing on your own, like from scratch. If you get stuck, come back to this video for like follow along again and then work on your solution. You will have an idea, like you at least try something. Like you thought about the problem and you thought about what to do, how to solve it, and then you try to implement this. Great. If you get stuck, come back, look at it, look at the solution, try, and then the next day, the couple of days after, try to do the same thing again from scratch. If you cannot do that, come back to the solution. If you can do that, I think you pretty much master Redux at that point. So I really hope you guys have a good time understanding this. If you have any problem, comment down below, reach out to me. And also comment down below what you want to see in the future. I have a lot of things planned, maybe some Next.js stuff, some couple more Tailwind React project, and coming the last finale of the whole Redux is going to be the Redux Toolkit, which is the modern Redux we use. So a lot less boilerplate, but I really want you to understand this. Once you understand all this, Redux Toolkit will be nothing. Like you will understand Redux Toolkit more easily. So that's the coming up video from the Redux playlist. And make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share this with your friend if you find this helpful, and turn on your notification. And yeah, see you on the next video.